Welcome back to the Rad City Design Studio. This week, my head isn't just in the clouds, it's actually right up into space. So let's make a planet. Before we get started, be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel so you never miss a project. I started with these two connector pieces from Michaels. My idea was to layer the two together to create a ringed planet like Saturn, but fancy. Simple enough, but I also really wanted to make it sparkle. I wanted it to be very attention grabbing. So I grabbed some Mylar Flakes and I laid out what I like to think of as like a little river directly onto my silicone pad. So a little glitter river. Now I laid the circle connector on top so that the glitter river was actually within the frame of the circle. And I filled the circle with some UV resin. Then I used the end of a paintbrush to smooth the resin so that the glitter flakes were completely submerged. I outlined the Mylar Flakes with some black iridescent flat back rhinestones, try saying that 10 times fast, just to add a bit more texture. I was going for kind of like a geode look here, with like some druzy elements and things like that. So chunky, faceted textures were definitely the goal. I cured this for about 2 minutes to make sure that the resin was fully cured all around, especially because I was working with different elements that might cause the resin to not fully cure. Next up, I used a thin paintbrush to outline the rhinestones. Then I placed some gold leaf all along the outline. It wasn't super important for me to get the gold flakes to look any specific way just yet. I just wanted to make sure that any of the resin outline that I placed down was covered by the flakes. Once I was happy with it, I cured the pendant super well, then brushed away any excess gold leaf using my fingers. Now, just to really bump up the color saturation, I decided to coat the back side of the pendant with my black Posca Paint Marker. I love using this type of paint pen because it is so smooth on resin, and you almost always, depending on the color, you almost always get just a really nice opaque layer of color. I used my flush cutters to trim away the excess resin from outside of the frame, then used my hobby knife to skim away any resin that was left over to get it as close as possible to the frame. Now, if you aren't super worried about messing up your frame or your bezel, you could also do this with like a Dremel or something like that to just very easily smooth out any of that excess resin. I wanted to try to avoid that though because I didn't want to mess up the finish. Then I used my finger to actually pick up some of the little flakes of glitter from the lid, and then I pressed it directly to any of the open areas of my pendant. I was kind of aiming for like a look of stars deep within a galaxy, and I used a little nail scrub brush to try to knock off any of the excess gold flake. Once I was happy with how it looked, I then flooded the entire frame with a layer of resin. Now, a little hack that really helps me when I'm doing a flood coat like this is to place my item on a piece of Scotch tape or cello tape, depending on where you're from. It allows me to hold my piece in place or even move it around without worrying about accidentally touching the frame and getting the resin on my fingers. I cured this for another minute just to make sure everything was fully set. I absolutely loved how this was looking, and part of me kind of just wanted to leave it like this, but I also really wanted to turn it into a little planet. So to do this, I grabbed the oval connector and then I placed it on top of the pendant. Then I laid it down so that it surrounded both the front and the back of my pendant, and I just played around with it until I liked how it sat. Once I was happy with the placement, I turned it around, and on the back side, I marked where the oval connector overlapped the circle pendant with my black marker, just, 2 spots to know exactly where to cut. I then used my flush cutters to snip the connector of each of these 2 markings. Now, one thing I did off camera is I tried to file down the 2 places where I cut. First I tried with a nail file, then I used a Dremel, just to get it as smooth as possible because I didn't want it, accidentally scratching me when I tried to wear it. Now I wanted to make sure it would rest along the back and give me a good place to anchor the oval to the circle. I did have to bend the ring inward a little bit just to make sure it met the pendant in the right spot. And I used 2 dots of resin to cover the endpoints of the oval ring, and then I cured it for about 2 minutes to make sure that connection was really, really solid. I then added a flood coat to the entire back of the piece to make sure everything was locked in place and it wasn't going to budge. This also helped to make sure that it wasn't going to end up scratching me when I wore it. Off camera, I drilled a small hole for a jump ring, then added a gold tone chain to turn it into a necklace. But this would also be a really cool key ring or even a pop socket for your phone. Actually, that's an excellent idea. I may need to go make that. I hope you enjoyed this. I really love how it turned out. It's very, very elegant and pretty. Every time I look at it, I'm just kind of blown away by what resin can do. Do you ever just look at something you've made and think to yourself, wow, that's really cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you had so much fun hanging out with me during this project. I really hope you'll try the project for yourself. And if you do, definitely let me see, because you may get featured in an upcoming video. I really want to bring the community together and kind of show off all of the different things you guys have been making and sending to me. So if you have something you want to share, definitely leave a comment or reach out to me either through my email or on any of my social medias. So go make something awesome today, and as always, stay rad. I really think you'll love this next video, so be sure to give it a watch.